We start deep inside a dark dungeon. Our main character thinks he will never escape and expects to die there. People call him incompetent and look down on him. But then, he discovers his real power. Suddenly, a monster attacks him. He decides to fight back using his ability. His right eye changes, the pupil becomes a gear. A clock-like magic circle appears on his fist. He swings his hand and the magic circle blasts the monster away. This is the story of the so-called useless clock user, who was kicked out of the Craftsman Guild but finds his true strength deep inside the dungeon. Some time ago in the Royal Capital's Craftsman's Guild, Cyclo finished fixing a clock he was asked to repair. From the outside, the clock looked fine, but inside he saw that some gears were bent, which made the whole clock shift. He discovered this using his skill, Clock Appraisal. Then he used his clock storage skill to find parts to replace the broken ones. Since the clock was pneumatic, he planned to tell the owner to move it to a safer place later because it could break easily. He carefully put the parts together in silence. His smile showed that he liked his work. A few minutes later, a guildmate told him that the guildmaster wanted to talk to him. But then the guildmate saw Cyclo shaking at the table and asked if he was okay. Cyclo was excited because he finally touched a pneumatic clock in real life, something he had only read about in books. He couldn't stop looking at how the clock worked and all its gears. The guildmate thought Cyclo had finished fixing the clock. Cyclo said he was just doing the final check to make sure it worked. Since the clock was fixed, Cyclo used his skill called Clock Stop on it. This stopped the clock from moving to protect it from damage caused by vibrations and to keep it as it was. This rare clock was left behind by a nobleman. The nobleman's usual repairman couldn't fix it, so he gave it to the guild. The guildmate said that no one else but Cyclo could handle the clock. He called Cyclo amazing when it came to clocks. Cyclo smiled a little and said this was the only thing he was really good at. His skill, called the Clock User, was Cyclo's special ability. He went to the guildmaster and asked what he wanted to talk about. Without hesitation, the old man said that Cyclo was fired. Cyclo was shocked and asked what he had done wrong. The guildmaster said it was clear they did not need someone who was not good enough. Cyclo said he had helped the guild well and told how he had fixed an old clock from the palace. The guildmaster said that the job should be given to a more talented craftsman. Then a nerd appeared and said he was the talented one with the skill of craftsmanship. The guildmaster said his son could fix anything, unlike Cyclo, who could only fix clocks. The guildmaster said he had enough and told Cyclo to leave the guild. Cyclo asked him to think again, but the guildmaster simply kicked him out of the building. Cyclo walked around town thinking about what to do. He ended up at the highest place in town and remembered how he had always loved making things since he was a child. Everyone was happy with the magical tools he made. The first person he made happy was his mother. She often had trouble because the laundry got wet, so Cyclo made a device that could tell the weather. Everyone called 6-year-old Cyclo a genius. Even a merchant couple showed interest in him. They wanted him to marry their daughter and help run their business in the future. Everything went well until one day 2 years ago. Cyclo's sister Alice was pulling him somewhere quickly. Cyclo asked her to slow down, but she didn't listen. A girl who was following them laughed and wondered if their future daughter would be like Alice. Cyclo asked what she meant. The girl reminded them that they were engaged, but Cyclo said that was only something their parents decided. The girl asked if he didn't like her. Cyclo couldn't refuse her. Alice got jealous and kept pulling her brother. The girl did the same. The three then arrived at the church where their skills would be chosen. In the Kingdom of Heinberg, when citizens turned 16 and became adults, they always took part in this ceremony. Teenagers lined up while adults like parents and professionals watched. The girl was surprised to see many people there. Alice said that the most important people from guilds all over the country were attending. Cycle said anyone could be noticed and chosen right away because of that. When someone prayed in front of the crystal, a character would appear. The words shown by the crystal became the granted skill. Then it was the girl's turn. Cyclo wished Maria good luck. As Maria knelt and prayed, the crystal shone brighter than it did for anyone else. Even the priest was surprised by the characters that appeared. Maria had received the saint ability. Everyone was happy to see a saint appear. While people from the church gathered around Maria, Alice asked if the saint was the most special skill. Cyclo said it was a rare profession that had not shown up for decades. He thought Maria was amazing. There were two types of skills, general skills and profession skills. General skills showed up because of a person's natural traits, while profession skills appeared because of many traits combined. Profession skills were rare, and the law said people had to work in jobs that matched their skills. In this country, skills were more than just talents. They were a person's fate. After seeing how Maria became a saint, Cyclo hoped to get something just as good. Alice asked if they should go next. Cyclo asked for some time to build up his courage. Alice decided to go first. She told him not to think she was going first to be selfish. Cyclo told her to go ahead and patted her shoulder. Alice felt tears in her eyes. Thinking about her brother and Maria together made her emotional. She did not want to lose to a saint. Alice knelt and prayed in front of the crystal. Then the crystal shone brightly, just like it did for Maria a little while ago. The priest was surprised when a sage appeared. Alice was shocked too. Everyone else couldn't believe what was happening. They hoped they would get a rare skill as well. One person asked if being a sage was really that special. Someone answered that sage was the highest skill in both the magician and alchemist classes. It was Cyclo's turn next. The girls had big hopes for him. Even Cyclo thought he might get a powerful skill that could match the girls' abilities. The place suddenly became even brighter than it did during the girls' turns. Everyone was silent, amazed at what they saw. Cyclo somehow found himself in a strange dimension filled with floating gears. A powerful being asked why he wanted a special power. Cyclo thought about the people around him and said he wanted to make his family and everyone else happy. At that moment, someone's shout brought Cyclo back to reality. He wondered if he had just been daydreaming. But more importantly, he asked what his skill was. The priest then announced that he was a clock user. Cyclo didn't understand what that meant, so the priest said it was someone who worked with clocks. Everyone who heard it thought it sounded boring, especially since the crystal had shone so brightly earlier, making them expect a powerful or exciting skill. The priest opened a book and read that a clock user was the person in charge of a giant clock tower. The tower was built based on a song said to be sung by the god who created the world. What was certain was that Cyclo's role as a clock user was the first of its kind and very rare. Still, it was only considered a vocational skill, not something useful in battle. The priest then asked the next person to step forward. Cyclo wasn't happy with the explanation. Being a clock user gave him a very low rank. Right away, his engagement to Maria was cancelled. Maria told him that the church didn't approve of their engagement and her father didn't want her to marry someone like Cyclo. She kept saying sorry, but Cyclo understood it wasn't her fault. He told her he wouldn't give up. He promised to become the best clock user in the world, someone respected by everyone. He said he would return for her once he reached that goal. Maria said she would wait for him. Meanwhile, Alice was scouted by the Adventurers Guild and quickly started doing well. Their mother told her to come back home if things ever became too hard. Cyclo wished her the best and promised to support her when life got tough. Alice felt touched for a moment, but then said she didn't need help from her useless brother. Cyclo felt hurt by her words, but he reminded himself not to fall behind the girls. He later joined the Craftsman's Guild. Even though his boss didn't like him, the law required them to hire him. Still, they warned him not to be lazy. Some people praised the work he did. A nobleman even said it was a shame Cyclo couldn't become a great magic toolmaker and instead became a clock user. As a clock user, his skills were all related to clocks. He had abilities like stopping time, checking clocks, making clocks, storing clocks, and finding clocks. Each skill did exactly what its name said, but those were his limits. Maria and Alice, who had always been with him, were now gone. He was left behind, unable to move forward. Even if he hadn't become a clock user, from that day until now, he had always believed one thing. However, he was completely on his own. Cyclo walked home in the rain feeling sad. On the way, he overheard some women talking about a recent serial rapist. He hoped the police would do something about it. When they noticed Cyclo, they wondered if he was okay. Cyclo found himself thinking about what kind of person could enjoy doing such terrible things, but in the end, he didn't really care. As he kept walking, he passed a strange man wearing a hood. The man looked suspicious, but Cyclo didn't stop. When he finally got home, a woman greeted him warmly. She told him to hurry and change his clothes and wash up. Cyclo replied that he could take care of it himself. The woman was Miranda, their neighbor. She had been looking after Cyclo since he was young. After his mother fell in love and left, Miranda stepped in to take care of him like a mother would. Miranda handed him a cup of tea with gear patterns on it. She said she found the cup at the tool shop. She asked if he had gotten into a fight with someone from the guild. Cyclo told her that it wasn't the case and said he was fine. Miranda looked at him kindly and said there were things only he could do. Cyclo couldn't hold back his tears. He set his cup down and said the herbal tea tasted salty. Miranda laughed. Thanks to Miranda, Cyclo felt a little better. He knew he needed to figure out how to get back to work. He thought about asking a regular customer to recommend him, but most wouldn't even let him in without a letter from the guild. Cyclo stopped walking when he heard two people talking about their next target. He had heard about these people before. They were being talked about a lot in town. He quickly used his clock detection skill and found out there were two people nearby. They were talking about a woman who ran a pharmacy shop in the middle of a neighborhood. Cyclo immediately knew who they were talking about. There was only one woman who fit that description. That was Miranda. His anger rose quickly when he realized she was their next target. He wanted to punch them, but he knew he had to stay calm. One of the men seemed worried that their plan might cause too much attention, but the other man said it would be fine, as he was a policeman. Cyclo couldn't believe what he heard. A policeman, someone who was supposed to protect people, was planning a crime. Shocked and upset, Cyclo kicked a nearby can by accident. The noise caught the men's attention. The policeman walked toward him and with a fake smile asked if something was wrong. Cyclo got nervous and tried to talk about what he overheard. The policeman said he was just questioning someone, but also said it was strange for someone to be walking around here at this time. Cyclo felt a chill run through his body. He suddenly turned and ran away. The other man asked if they should have stopped him, but the policeman remembered that Cyclo often visited the pharmacy. He said Cyclo might be useful later. At the police station, Cyclo begged them to believe him. The officers thought he was just confused, but Cyclo insisted he really heard the suspect say he was a policeman. The police decided to take note of it. They then asked Cyclo what his job was. Cyclo, feeling uncomfortable, admitted he was unemployed and had just been fired from the Craftsman's Guild. The officers were surprised that someone so young didn't have a job. Cyclo felt things were turning against him. Now he looked suspicious. In that world, people with professional skills were expected to have jobs, unless something was wrong with their character. The police decided to stay alert, and Cyclo asked them to do so. On his way home, Cyclo realized that people didn't trust someone without a job. He decided to take matters into his own hands. He planned to stop the suspect himself. He would wait for them, catch them, and make a scene so others would see what was happening. It was the only plan he had. While hiding, he noticed the suspects coming. He recognized them by the sound of their special clock. It was the same person he had seen in the alleys before. When the man, dressed as a policeman, tried to open a door, Cyclo ran toward him and tackled him. The man was caught off guard and fell to the ground. Cyclo shouted for help and nearby people heard him. Cyclo felt hopeful. It seemed like things would finally go right, but the man smiled. Then he flipped Cyclo over and pinned him down instead. Just then, Miranda arrived and asked what was happening. The man told her to call the other officers because he had caught a serial criminal. Cyclo was shocked. Miranda was even more shocked to hear Cyclo was the one being accused. Cyclo tried to explain, but the man kept him pinned down and said it had been worth watching the area. Cyclo couldn't speak for himself. He felt like everything was falling apart. He reached out to Miranda, but his hand couldn't reach her. He had always wanted to make people happy. He had always believed he could do the right thing. Everyone looked at him with disgust. Even Maria looked disappointed. In the end, Cyclo was sentenced to exile. He was sent to the frontier as a criminal slave. But this was only the beginning of his story. This moment was just one part of the larger machine that made up the strange and unfair world he lived in. One day he would be known as the hero who changed everything. Back when the trial was happening, Cyclo kept shouting that he hadn't done anything wrong. He said there was no proof that he was the one who did it. The judge started to wonder if that was true. Then the police officer from earlier, Bujin, came out to speak. Cyclo was confused about why Bujin was there. He pointed at Bujin and said he was the real culprit. But Bujin told the court that Cyclo had paid local troublemakers to clear the area. He also said Cyclo had hurt several women and that the police had already finished their investigation. Cyclo couldn't believe they were blaming him. The people watching were also shocked. They didn't think Cyclo could do something so awful. Cyclo then noticed something strange. Even though it was just a simple trial, there were a lot of people watching. Most of them seemed connected to the women who had been hurt. At that moment, Cyclo realized he was in serious trouble if they believed he had committed such a terrible crime. Then Bujin brought in some witnesses. To everyone's surprise, Maria showed up, and she was with the hero. People wondered why the protectors of the capital came to such a small place. Cyclo was even more shocked when he saw Maria standing on the other side. She looked at him and started to feel sick. The hero told her it was okay and encouraged her to tell the truth, promising he would stay by her side. This moment touched the crowd. Seeing how close the hero and Maria were, many believed they would get married soon. Maria revealed that Cyclo used to be her fiancé. She had been sending him letters and money, thinking he might be struggling with his job as a clock user. Cyclo, confused, asked what she meant. Bujin explained that the church had records of the money transfers. Cyclo said he never received any money. The people watching couldn't believe he kept denying it. Then Bujin called someone over saying it was Cyclo's accomplice. But it turned out the man was actually working with Bujin. The man claimed Cyclo gave them the money and told them to leave the area, saying they didn't know what he might do next. Miranda was shocked by what she heard. Cyclo said he didn't know the man and had never done anything like that. Maria then spoke. She said she had hoped Cyclo would admit the truth and learn from his mistakes. Instead, he called her and the church liars. She called him the lowest kind of person. Cyclo felt crushed. He could only remember the promise they once made. He tried to get close to her, but the hero pointed his sword at him and told him to stay back. He called Cyclo a cruel man who didn't care about Maria's kindness. Cyclo shouted, asking why no one believed him. He begged Miranda to speak up for him, saying he wasn't the kind of person who would do something so wrong. But Miranda only looked away, clearly upset. At that moment, Cyclo felt everything was lost. He was just a clock user standing against a saint, a hero, and a policeman. With people like them around, no one would listen to him. In the end, he was sent away to live in exile at the edge of the land. Afterward, Bujin took Cyclo to the prison cells and thanked him for taking the blame. But Cyclo angrily promised to take Bujin down with him someday. His eyes changed and his pupils looked like turning gears. Bujin told him to go ahead and insult him one more time. Once Cyclo was locked up, Bujin went to another room. There, the hero was surrounded by a group of young girls. Bujin told him that the criminal's transfer was done. When the girls saw both the hero, Raven of the Crowheart family, and Officer Bujin of the Bojack family, they were amazed. They believed that a person's strength could be seen in their appearance, and the two men looked impressive. Later in the same room, Raven said he didn't expect things to go so well. He admitted that Cyclo had caused him trouble too. Bujin asked how Raven got the saint to speak up. Raven replied that he only told her the truth. Apparently, the saint didn't know someone from the church had been stealing the money she sent and burning her letters. Still, Raven thanked Bujin for handling Cyclo. He said all he had left to do now was comfort Maria, who was heartbroken. Bujin joked that Raven was a wicked noble, but Raven pointed out that Bujin, a viscount, wasn't any better. Bujin said the world was boring unless they kept chasing after women. Raven agreed with a laugh. The two trusted each other and saw themselves as partners in crime and winners. But they didn't realize that someone was secretly listening to their conversation. Soon after, Cyclo was taken by carriage to the northern part of the kingdom of Heinberg. This was where the worst dungeon called the Deep Hole was located. No one had ever reached the bottom of this dungeon. It was also a place where adventurers fought dangerous monsters that came out of it. Because of the dungeon, the area grew with new buildings and businesses to support the adventurers. This place marked the edge of the land known as Norththoria. Later at the Adventurers Guild, everyone watched as Cyclo was dragged inside. A man saw him and assumed Cyclo was the new porter sent from the capital. The man introduced himself as Guan Koyaj, the leader of the Adventurers Guild. He said he had heard stories about Cyclo from the Great Sage. Cyclo thought things might get better since he was related to Alice. But then, Guan said Alice had told people that her brother was hopeless and couldn't do anything right. Cyclo said it wasn't true, but even the guild receptionist confirmed that Alice had said those things. Cyclo felt like the world around him was fading. He couldn't believe his little sister, whom he loved so much, would say that about him. Guan told him he wouldn't go easy on someone like him. He said Cyclo would work like a slave until he died. Cyclo's hope began to disappear. People had always called him useless because of his lame-sounding skill. Even though he tried hard as a porter, no one ever appreciated his work. He had been beaten many times. He ate food made for animals. In time, all his hope was gone. Cyclo became someone who only said yes when spoken to. Even that annoyed the adventurers, and they would beat him up. He stopped caring. He felt like an old piece of cloth, worn out and thrown away. Then one of the adventurers suddenly had an idea. The adventurers dragged Cyclo to a hole that people believed was the entrance to the Deep Hole's abyss. Cyclo stayed silent the whole time. The adventurers were upset with his boring reaction. They said that even though they were A-ranked adventurers, they still made the effort to bring him there. They couldn't believe how useless Cyclo seemed. Cyclo, on the other hand, thought falling into the hole would be an easy way to die. But then, Cyclo saw something strange. He imagined Bujin asking him to take the blame and die in his place. This vision shocked Cyclo and made him snap out of his thoughts. He started to struggle because he realized he didn't want to die like this. His sudden movement made one of the adventurers angry and they pushed him. Cyclo fell into the hole, screaming as he dropped into the darkness until his voice faded away. Later, Cyclo woke up and looked around. He was surprised to be alive. It felt like a miracle. Even though he had thought life didn't matter, now that he had almost died, he realized he still wanted to live. When he looked up, he saw thick spider webs above him. They had slowed down his fall. The fact that he was light and unconscious also helped him survive. Since he was still alive, Cyclo decided to figure out what to do next. He made a clock and saw that more than half a day had passed since he fell. He checked what he had with him: 1 bottle of water, a metal match, and a knife. His next worry was the monsters. He knew he was in a part of the deep hole that no one had explored before, so he needed to move carefully. At that moment, something hit the top of Cyclo's head, making him jump in shock. He looked up to see what it was. Above him was a giant creature. It had the body of a tall human, but its head looked like a monster. The strange creature was eating another monster. Cyclo couldn't believe what he was seeing. He stayed quiet and watched as the monster finished its meal. Then the monster slowly turned toward him. Its face had no eyes, but it growled in his direction. Cyclo froze. He had just seen this creature eat something way bigger than him. Before he could run, one of the monster's tentacles moved. It had an eyeball at the end and it spotted him. Cyclo took off, running as fast as he could. He knew he was in serious danger. He found a hole and jumped inside. The monster's attack barely missed him. Cyclo kept crawling deeper into the hole while the monster tried to reach in after him. He believed he would be safe if he kept moving. After a while, he saw a light up ahead, but when he got there, it wasn't a way out. It was a dead end, a huge drop that could lead to his death. No matter where he went, danger was waiting. 5 days have passed since Cyclo entered the hole. He noticed the monster still waiting outside as if it was saving him for later. Cyclo was weak and tired. He looked like a mummy. He couldn't remember the last time he ate a real meal. He wished he could eat his mother's meat pie again. At that moment, Cyclo started seeing things. He saw Maria and Alice calling out to him, telling him to join them. They said he didn't need to go through more pain. Feeling happy to see them, Cyclo stood up to go with them, but suddenly their voices changed. They said someone like him, who was useless, should just die. Cyclo screamed as he came back to his senses. He had almost jumped off while seeing those visions. Then he saw a lizard nearby. He said sorry to it as he picked it up. Without thinking, he ate it. He groaned in disgust as he chewed. When he saw the lizard's cut-off tail, he realized he was just like it. Because he couldn't protect himself, others had thrown him away when he became a problem. He got angry as he remembered everything. How he got his skill, lost his job, got blamed for something he didn't do, and how Maria left him. He couldn't believe it and he cursed out loud. He punched the wall again and again until his fists bled. He swore he would take revenge on everyone who had looked down on him. He wouldn't forgive them. He promised himself he would live no matter what. He shouted that he wouldn't die in a place like this. His anger caused a pillar of light to shoot up from the deep hole. The guards at the border saw it and rushed to report it to the Lord. Even Guan didn't know what was going on. Cyclo didn't understand it either. A glowing magic circle appeared around him shaped like a clock. His eyes started to look like turning gears. He stood there wondering what had just happened to him. Cyclo felt confused and wondered if the strange feeling was because of the lizard he had eaten. But that didn't make sense. His hunger was gone, and even his wounds had healed. He realized the feeling in his stomach was his body's internal clock. Using his powers, he turned his body back to a time when he was still full and healthy. Suddenly, images of himself flashed in his mind. He used Time Stop, and just like he thought, his energy and strength came rushing back. He found this helpful. He just needed to keep fixing his body and survive by drinking only water. Since the monster was still outside waiting near the exit, he chose to stay inside and think of a way to escape. Before this, Cyclo could only use his powers on mechanical clocks. But now, it seemed the saying was true. The more you use a skill, the better you get. His clock user abilities had grown. Now, he could control hourglasses, water clocks, and sundials, anything with the word clock, or anything that worked like a clock. He decided to start training. First, he made a water clock and a sand timer. By studying and analyzing them, he understood how they worked. Then, he removed the containers and used his magic to control just the water and sand. Next, he created a sundial and made a small sunlight orb using his life energy. It was only as big as his fist. To make a bigger one, he knew he had to improve his physical strength too. 1 month passed by with just physical training. Cyclo concentrated as he created the 3 types of clocks: sundial, water clock, and sand timer. He tried to heighten his awareness as he concentrated. He then used Time Stop to freeze the clocks in their perfect states. Cyclo was glad that he did it. He managed to finish the first step. Next thing to note was his skills application in battle. For now, he wrote down everything he had learned from studying the 3 types of clocks he could make. He was still worried that his clock perception wasn't very accurate because things like walls got in the way, and he knew he needed something better than just using his eyes. When he saw the sundial's sunlight orb shine on a water bottle, he got an idea. He could use the shadows instead. Discovering new things made Cyclo feel like a curious kid again. But this time, he was also driven by the need to take revenge on those who had hurt him. To do that, he had to keep improving his skills. 2 months had passed since Cyclo started researching his power. He had made a long list of what he could do now, and he felt proud of what he had achieved. The only thing left was to defeat the monster and escape. Cyclo then used his clock sense and clock generation skills at the same time. Through practice, he had made the sundial's search and the water clock's water perception much stronger. Now he could sense the whole level around him. By combining clock sense and the water clock, he could find anything living that had liquid flowing inside, like blood in animals. He also learned how to create a small sunlight orb from the sundial using clock generation. This could help him sense things too, by using the shadows it made. Even in faraway places, Cyclo could now understand where everything was, almost like he was holding the whole area in his hands. As Cyclo kept watching, he thought the monster at the entrance was sharpening its claws, but in reality it was forcing its way through. Cyclo couldn't believe the creature was able to squeeze through such a small opening. It let out a loud roar like it hadn't eaten in days. Cyclo had been training for this moment for months, but he was still surprised. The monster had also been slowly breaking the rocks around the entrance. His legs were shaking, so he punched them to stop the fear. He made up his mind. He had to fight. He tried to use his clock user power, but the monster attacked first. Tentacles flew at him. Cyclo barely dodged them. If he hadn't, he would have been finished. He ran to create space between them and thought about what to do. He realized the monster's eye was the problem. Cyclo used clock generation but only called out the sand from his sand timer. He shaped it into a sharp slash and sent it flying at the monster. The sand cut off its tentacles, and the monster screamed in pain. Cyclo felt like he had done well, but then the monster started shaking and going wild. It smashed everything around it. Cyclo had to keep running to avoid the attacks. As the monster continued thrashing, the entrance collapsed behind it, sealing them both inside. The whole place turned dark. Cyclo thought this might be the end. But then he noticed something. The monster had stopped attacking. It had lost track of him in the darkness. Cyclo used clock sense, and he was able to find the monster by sensing the fluids in its body. Using this chance, he activated clock generation again and formed a blade. He slashed at the monster and cut it in half. What he used was the guiding hand of a sundial, shaped into a blade that sliced straight through his enemy. Cyclo was out of breath. He created a small light from the sundial to see better. The monster was no longer moving. He used clock perception to check the monster's body fluids. Since they weren't flowing anymore, he knew it was dead. Cyclo started to cry. He couldn't believe it. He had defeated a monster. At that moment, he felt something warm flow through his body. He realized this was what adventurers called a level up. By killing monsters, people could grow stronger by taking in their power. Now, Cyclo knew it. If he kept defeating monsters, he could keep getting stronger. A small smile appeared on his face. His journey for revenge had finally begun. The gears that once stopped were turning again. Cyclo smiled widely and activated his clock user powers. It was time to rise. The monsters saw Cyclo. He decided to defeat them. Cyclo used his clock generation skill, and sharp blades made of water sliced through the monsters. This was another way he used the water clock, which could create fast-moving water blades. One monster tried to attack from behind, but Cyclo dodged it. He thought maybe leveling up helped him see their attacks more clearly. The monsters then used their tentacles to strike from a distance. Cyclo used his skill again, this time turning the water clock's container into a shield. He also made a clock's hand and used it like a sword. The clock generation skill didn't just make clocks, it could also create parts of clocks in any shape he wanted. If Cyclo knew the material, he could make almost anything, even the best metals. His sword was made of orichalcum, and he used it to cut through the monsters. He had clock sense active and noticed smaller monsters nearby. Using his skill, he formed sundials on the monsters' bodies, slicing them in half. Cyclo felt magic power flow into him as he leveled up again. Then something huge showed up. It was twice the size of the other monsters. Cyclo realized this was the boss monster. The boss attacked, but Cyclo was fast enough to dodge. He used clock generation to create sand and water, firing them as sharp blades. The boss blocked the attack using its tentacles, forming a net-like shield. Cyclo saw that this monster was smarter than the others. He made another clock hand to use as a sword, but the monster surprised him. Tentacles came out from the ground behind Cyclo and trapped him in a ball-shaped net. Just in time, Cyclo made a shield. He said he couldn't hold on much longer and asked for help. The monster growled, thinking it had won, but Cyclo smirked. He had only been pretending. He created 3 full clocks at once, breaking out of the tentacles. The boss monster screamed as its tentacles were cut and burned. Cyclo said his perception was perfect. He could sense everything the monster did because of the fluids in its body. Then he showed the monster his most powerful clock. Somehow, the boss monster's body exploded from the inside. It seemed Cyclo had taken control of its body clock using clock generation. The monster let out its dying and last roar. Cyclo finally calmed down a bit and started moving forward. The monsters were now scared and tried to escape. However, since the tables had turned, he asked the monsters how they feel that they are now the preys. He activated the magic power he could, not letting the monsters escape. After some time, Cyclo's clock sense confirmed that there were no more monsters left in the dungeon lair. He opened his clock storage and gathered all the dropped items and monster bodies before getting ready to leave. In the past, the clock storage could only hold clocks, but now it could store almost anything, and there was no limit to how much it could hold. Cyclo finally took a break. He drank some water from his water clock. He also had cubes he called energy cubes. These cubes helped him recover his strength. Each cube was made from a small amount of life energy stored in the clock storage. Even though each cube used just a little energy, it could restore his stamina 100 times over. Once the clock storage confirmed that everything had been collected, Cyclo decided it was time to move on. But before leaving, he noticed some wilted flowers. He was surprised to see flowers in a place like the Abyss. He touched one and used his skill, clock operation. The flower slowly came back to life. Cyclo had only turned back time a little, but he wished the flower would keep hanging on, just like he was trying to do. To him, it felt like the first beautiful thing he had seen since being banished from the royal capital. Cyclo kept moving deeper into the dungeon. A glowing sunlight orb lit the way as he walked through the dark tunnels. Eventually, he found stairs going upward. He realized that he just had to keep climbing, and soon he could begin his plan for revenge. So he continued moving upward, defeating every monster he met along the way. After each battle, he would take short rests, then go forward again. Along the way, he even learned how to shoot fireballs by using the heat from his sundial's sunlight orb. It didn't take long before he reached a floor shaped like a round arena, surrounded by flames. Cyclo used his clock sense and confirmed that no living creatures were on that floor. But then he heard a cold, eerie voice. It sounded surprised to see a human coming from below. Cyclo was shocked because his detection hadn't picked up anything. He quickly created a shield and a sword from his clocks. The voice laughed and told him not to rush. Then it introduced itself as the guardian of the Labyrinth of Judgment's middle layer. From the dark flames, a face appeared. The figure called itself the Elder Wraith. It laughed and used magic to reveal its full body. Cyclo could feel right away. This enemy was nothing like the ones he had fought before. When Cyclo heard the Elder Wraith speak, he realized that the deep hole was actually called the Labyrinth of Judgment. He also couldn't believe he had made it to the middle layers. Magic circles appeared around him, and the Elder Wraith said this would be the end for Cyclo now that they had met. The monster shot snake-shaped flames at Cyclo and demanded his life. Cyclo quickly used his water clock to create a shield, but the heat was too strong. The shield wasn't enough, and the heat made it hard for him to concentrate. The Elder Wraith kept attacking, telling Cyclo to burn. But to the monster's surprise, Cyclo managed to block the attacks just in time. Cyclo then used the water from his water clocks to form ice walls. At that moment, Cyclo figured out that the enemy was a spirit type. Since the Wraith had no blood, Cyclo's clock sense didn't detect it. More than that, Cyclo was angry because the Elder Wraith looked down on him. Cyclo created a sunlight orb using his sundial, and a beam of light shot out and hit the monster. The Elder Wraith groaned in pain as the spot exploded. Cyclo was happy that it worked. The Elder Wraith was shocked that a human could use magic that could hurt him. Cyclo told him to shut up and disappear, then made more sunlight orbs. The monster couldn't believe what he was seeing. He couldn't avoid the light beams and got hit again. As he faded away, the Elder Wraith said he couldn't believe he had lost. When he vanished, a cloak of shadows dropped to the ground. Cyclo looked at it and wondered if he had really won. Then he laughed a little and said that the Elder Monster wasn't so tough after all. As Cyclo tried to collect the monster's body, the Elder Wraith smiled from the shadows and began swirling around him. The Wraith had been waiting for the right moment to catch Cyclo off guard. Cyclo had forgotten that Wraiths were known for tricking people and taking over their bodies after death. This Wraith was even more dangerous because he was stronger than usual. The Elder Wraith praised Cyclo for lasting this long. But now he said it was time to curse Cyclo to death and use his body as a new vessel. The Wraith then stabbed Cyclo in the heart with his claws. Cyclo screamed in pain. He felt both the stabbing wound and the curse slowly spreading through his body. As the Elder Wraith grinned, Cyclo panicked, unsure of what to do. But Cyclo didn't wait any longer. He created a ball of sunlight in front of him, catching the Wraith by surprise. The Wraith asked if Cyclo planned to burn both of them. Cyclo confirmed that. He wanted to see who would last longer. He challenged the Wraith to a battle of endurance. The Elder Wraith thought Cyclo was crazy. Still, he watched as Cyclo struggled through the curse and the heat. Cyclo was reaching his limit. The Wraith only needed to wait a little longer. Then the Elder Wraith slipped behind Cyclo. Cyclo lost control and screamed in agony. The Wraith knew he had won. He took over Cyclo's body. Cyclo's hair turned white and his arms dropped to his sides. Now in Cyclo's body, the Elder Wraith laughed. With his new form, he planned to hunt humans once again. But before the Elder Wraith could take a step forward, he felt something was wrong. Cyclo's spirit was still awake. He couldn't let a monster like that eat more people. He forced himself to take out the energy cubes and threw them into his mouth. He didn't want his own body to hurt anyone. The Elder Wraith was shocked that Cyclo was still fighting and wouldn't let him take over his body. Then Cyclo's body healed right away, and the Elder Wraith was pushed out of him. The Elder Wraith couldn't believe it. When he saw the cubes, he realized Cyclo could create life energy. Cyclo stared at the monster and used his skills again. He promised himself that he would escape the dungeon and prove the world wrong for turning its back on him. The Elder Wraith called his goal a foolish dream, then used his final spell. Both of them fired their magic at the same time, but Cyclo's power was stronger. A large ball of sunlight hit the Elder Wraith and burned him into ashes. As the monster faded away, it cursed Cyclo one last time before turning into a magic crystal. Cyclo, who had been tense the whole time, finally took a deep breath. He felt thankful that the energy cube saved him just in time. He remembered that the Elder Wraith said they were only in the middle layer. That meant even stronger monsters were waiting below. Cyclo also realized that his clock user skill wasn't all-powerful. If he used it the wrong way, he could still lose. For now, he wanted to forget about everything and slapped himself hard. That was enough for him to think things through. At that moment, he noticed something strange when he looked at a broken piece of glass. He created a shield using a mirror. That's when he realized his hair had turned white. He wondered if it was because of the curse. He hoped he could fix it, but since it didn't hurt him, he decided to ignore it. After that, Cyclo decided to leave. He walked past many adventurers and camps. His main goal was to reach the exit at the top of a long staircase. When he finally got there, he began to cry while smiling. He shouted with joy because he had made it back to the surface world. People outside saw him and wondered what was wrong. They thought he had finally gone crazy inside the dungeon. But what they didn't know was that Owen had just become the first human to clear the middle layer of the worst dungeon all by himself. Meanwhile, back in the capital, without Cyclo, things were starting to fall apart. The Craftsman's Guild was losing business. Miranda was chained and finally turned into a plaything. And Maria was being taken advantage of by the Twisted Hero. At the same time, Alice had just finished hunting a dangerous monster. Someone asked if she was going to send the reward to her brother again. Alice said yes. She explained that her brother couldn't take care of himself, so she had to help him. Big changes were coming, not just for Alice and the others, but for Cyclo too. The scene moved to the old clock Cyclo had been working on before he lost his job and was exiled. An old woman had believed Cyclo was the only one who could fix it. She looked like a queen. She then gave a command. She told her servants to search for the clock user, Cyclo Owen, no matter what it took them. Cyclo finally came back to town and pulled out his exploration permit from his clock storage. When he thought about it, he might have been the first person to reach the middle layers. A guard asked for his permit. Cyclo happily showed it. But the guard gave him a disgusted look. Cyclo didn't understand why until the guard called him a criminal slave and rudely told him to go inside. As Cyclo walked through the streets, he tried asking people how to find the Adventurers Guild. But people thought he looked dirty. When they saw his collar, they wondered if he had escaped from somewhere. Cyclo had forgotten about the collar and tried to explain, but no one wanted him near. A child even threw a rock at him from a window. Without looking, Cyclo caught it with his bare hands. Everyone around him was shocked. That moment reminded Cyclo that no matter how strong he was still seen as a criminal slave. Cyclo decided to stop asking for help and tried to remember the way himself. While walking through an alley, he saw a place where light was shining. When he peeked inside, he found a young girl chained up. He was shocked to see a child in such a place. The girl noticed him, and Cyclo quickly apologized for staring. He told her he was lost and asked if she knew the way to the Adventurers Guild. The girl stared at him, and Cyclo guessed she was scared of him because of the collar. But then, she slowly raised her weak arms and pointed in a direction. In a quiet voice, she gave him the answer. He thought she meant the stairs, and she nodded. Cyclo smiled and thanked her. The girl seemed surprised, but then he left her behind. Cyclo thought she reminded him of the white flower he once saw in the deep hole. Because of her, he felt ready to move forward again. He then pushed the guild's door open hard, surprising everyone inside. But someone was even more shocked. They recognized him. It was the same group who had pushed Cyclo into the abyss. Cyclo asked to see the guildmaster and said he had returned from the depths of hell. From that moment on, he chose to change his fate. At the Craftsman Guild in the royal capital, the bald guildmaster angrily threw some papers on the floor. He shouted, wondering why so many contracts were suddenly being cancelled. His son tried to calm him down, but the guildmaster blamed him instead. He was upset that his son had failed to fix Lady Olivia's valuable clock. It had broken again after only 3 days. The guildmaster said his son was even worse than Cyclo, someone he already thought was useless. His son argued that he wasn't that bad. He said he had found a useless part that Cyclo had added and removed it. He blamed Cyclo's poor repair work for breaking the clock in the first place. Suddenly, someone burst into the office. A group of other craftsmen followed, all staring angrily. One of them shouted that they had had enough. They said they were tired of being treated poorly and paid so little, like they were beginners. They also complained that jobs were being assigned poorly. New workers who didn't know much were leading, while experienced ones were pushed aside. They said they couldn't work like that anymore. The guildmaster yelled at them to be quiet. He couldn't believe they were calling the new leaders newbies. He said those people had general skills and many certificates, unlike the craftsmen, who could only do one thing. He told them they should at least be thankful they were getting paid on their days off. The room went quiet, but the tension was still there. Then, the bald craftsman leading them stepped forward. He had reached his limit and punched the guildmaster. The guildmaster's son just hid in the corner and watched. The craftsman said they were done with the guild. They planned to leave and find work on their own. As they walked out, they said firing Cyclo had been a mistake. They didn't believe he was a criminal. They thought he had been falsely accused and knew that Cyclo only cared about clocks. The guildmaster got up and his son asked if he was okay. He told his son to shut up and stand. Then he looked at the pile of cancelled contracts. He lost his temper again, yelling and throwing a fit. Even then, he still wanted to blame Cyclo for the broken clock, which started this mess, and make him apologize. Meanwhile, Bujin went to the neighborhood to visit Miranda. He brought her a smile and some flowers. She said sorry for the trouble, but he told her it was okay because it was his job as a policeman to help people. Miranda still couldn't believe that Cyclo was the serial rapist. She used to think he was a good person and hoped he would change. Bujin told her that Cyclo had been sent to a faraway town to work as a servant and get help, thanks to his family's connections. But he didn't tell her the truth that Cyclo might be going through something worse than death as a criminal slave. Miranda thanked Bujin for what he did. He smiled and reminded her about the proposal he had made before. But behind that smile, he was hiding something dark. After that, Miranda rode in a carriage to visit Bujin's land. He had suggested the trip to help her relax, and Miranda thought it was kind of him to arrange the carriage and even a coachman to go with her. But then the carriage suddenly stopped. A man with a wide grin stood in front of her, holding a knife. He called out to someone behind him. When Miranda turned to look, she saw it was the coachman. Before she could react, the man covered her mouth. He quickly said he was only doing his job. Miranda had no idea what was going on. She started to panic and hoped Bujin would come to save her. At that moment, she heard a familiar voice. It was Bujin thanking the coachman and giving him money. Miranda was shocked. She looked at Bujin trying to ask for help, but Bujin only gave her an evil smile. That's when Miranda understood. Bujin had tricked her. She also started to wonder if Cyclo's case had been a lie all along. Cyclo's identity was finally confirmed because of his collar. He said sorry for disappointing them by returning. The guildmaster Guan asked again if Cyclo really came back from the deep hole. Cyclo said yes and then pointed to the adventurers who had pushed him down into the abyss. The adventurers quickly tried to defend themselves. Guan remembered a report that said Cyclo had gone crazy after seeing a monster and had fallen off the cliff on his own. But Cyclo said that wasn't true at all. He explained how the others had treated him badly. He said they teased him about being pushed off, and in the end they actually did it. Guan said that if what Cyclo said was true, then the others would be held responsible. He also added that giving a false report was another serious offense. The adventurers started to panic. They didn't think they would get caught. Cyclo then joked that they should have picked a better place to push someone. Still, he thanked them. Because of what happened, he survived and became stronger. To him, it was a win. He even told them they should be thanking him. This made the adventurers angry, and they all attacked him at once. Everyone thought Cyclo would lose, but to Cyclo, the adventurers were too slow. He blocked their attacks with his bare hands and even threw them off. He said this was attempted murder, another crime added to their list. They tried to attack again, but suddenly they got trapped inside a glass container. Cyclo had made an hourglass and the adventurers were stuck at the bottom part. They couldn't break it. Cyclo explained that the sand would run out in 10 minutes. Until then, he wanted them to confess everything. Guan then said the questioning was over, and they needed to focus on the main point again. Cyclo guessed it was about how he escaped the deep hole. Guan said he was right. After that, Guan finally understood everything and thanked Cyclo for telling him the whole story. It really sounded like Cyclo had been through a lot. Cyclo said that he had. Guan wanted to believe him, but he asked if Cyclo had any proof that he actually reached the lower levels. In response, Cyclo calmly opened his clock storage. Suddenly, the bodies of strange monsters started falling out. Everyone was shocked as they had never seen creatures like those before. They also wondered where Cyclo had pulled them from. Cyclo opened more storage and said he had even more. Guan quickly told him to stop. The first ones were already more than enough as proof. The dismantlers then started doing their work. Cyclo just hoped that the parts from these monsters would be valuable. At that moment, the receptionist asked if Cyclo didn't like the herbal tea since he hadn't touched it. Cyclo apologized and said he had a lot on his mind. The tea had reminded him of Miranda. After a while, Guan came back with the results from the appraisal and gave a rough estimate. Altogether, Cyclo would receive 10,000 gold coins, which was the same as 100 platinum coins. Cyclo was speechless. When he used to work as a clock technician, he only earned 1 platinum coin per year. Now he was getting 100 years worth of his old salary all at once. He nervously asked if it was really okay for him to get that much. Guan confirmed it was. Every monster Cyclo brought wasn't recorded before, so of course the reward was that high. Cyclo understood. He thought that if he had discovered his true powers as a clock user earlier, maybe he could have spent his life laughing with everyone. But now, that no longer mattered to him. At that moment, Guan lowered his head and said sorry to Cyclo. He apologized for not doing anything while Cyclo was being treated badly. As another human being, he felt it was right to say sorry. He had known Cyclo was being abused, but since Cyclo was a well-known criminal slave, Guan chose to support the adventurers for the good of the guild. Cyclo understood that the guildmaster had ignored his suffering. Still, he agreed that it was probably the best choice for the guild. After thinking quietly for a moment, he said it was a selfish decision. Guan asked him to try and see it that way. This moment helped Cyclo realize that the guildmaster wasn't his enemy, so he asked for 100 platinum coins to buy his freedom from being a criminal slave. He also showed his criminal document, which stated that he had to pay 10,000 gold coins. Guan had almost forgotten about the guild's redemption system. Cyclo said he wanted to be free and become a legal adventurer. He asked if the guildmaster could help with that. Guan smiled and said he would. Cyclo was happy that Guan understood him quickly, and without waiting, he broke his own collar. The next morning, Cyclo woke up feeling rested. It had been a long time since he last slept in a real bed. When he looked out the window, he remembered going back to the garbage dump, but the girl he saw earlier was no longer there. He thought he must have imagined her since it didn't make sense for anyone to be there. Later at the Adventurers Guild, the receptionist greeted him and said she would call the guildmaster right away. Cyclo thanked her, though he still wasn't used to how differently she treated him now. Soon, Guan showed up and said Cyclo's adventurer registration was complete. The receptionist also confirmed that his deposit account had been set up. Cyclo was surprised by how fast everything had been done and thanked them again. Guan then gave Cyclo his guild card, proof that he was now an adventurer. Cyclo was confused when he saw the card was black. He had never seen one like it before and asked what rank it meant. Adventurers were ranked by their strength. When Cyclo used to work as a porter, he had the lowest rank. F ranks went from F to D for beginners, B and C for team fighters, A for strong solo fighters, and S for people with rare skills. Above them were the legendary ranked adventurers. Guan explained that Cyclo's black card was actually a legendary card. As for his exact rank, he told Cyclo to check it for himself. Cyclo was taken to a room with a special machine. Unlike the usual machines that had simple levers, this one looked more advanced. Guan said the normal machine wouldn't have worked for someone like Cyclo. Cyclo looked at the device and said he knew how to use it. He had never done a status check before when he was a porter, so he was curious to see how strong he had become since entering the deep hole. As soon as he pulled the lever, a bright light came from the machine. A screen showed his stats. Everything was at S level or higher. His guild rank was listed as triple S. Cyclo couldn't believe it. Guan said the results matched what Cyclo had achieved. Cyclo still thought it was hard to believe. Guan then brought up his sister Alice the Great Sage. She was an S-rank adventurer, and even she only had S-rank stats in her strongest areas, with the rest being A or B. But Cyclo had gone beyond all of that. Guan said it was something extremely rare in history. Cyclo thought it was crazy. It didn't even feel real to him. Suddenly, the guildmaster said he had a request for Cyclo. He asked if Cyclo was willing to meet the city lord. Cyclo was confused by the sudden request. Guan explained that he had told the lord about Cyclo and the lord became interested. He wanted to hear more directly from Cyclo. Cyclo went quiet. He thought this could be a chance to connect with someone powerful. Maybe he could use that to get back at the people who had treated him badly. He quickly agreed, since the offer sounded good for him too. Guan was pleased but suggested that Cyclo dress properly first. Soon after, Cyclo stepped into a shop that looked expensive. He felt nervous as he introduced himself to the clerk and asked for equipment. The clerk asked for his guild card and was shocked to see he was SSS ranked. She quickly ran off and asked him to wait. An old man appeared and greeted Cyclo. He was surprised to meet an SSS ranked adventurer and promised to make the best equipment for him. Cyclo noticed the old man's hands. They looked like the hands of someone who had worked for many years, an artisan. Cyclo believed he would do a good job and asked how long it would take. The old man asked him to wait a moment and said his job skill was Grand Couturier, a high-level tailor. As soon as he touched the needle and thread, he started moving fast, so fast that Cyclo saw blurs of his hands. It was like watching a music conductor in action. In no time, the clothes were finished. Cyclo liked how they looked, but something felt strange. The old man asked him to place his hand near the robe. When he did, a pattern showed up. It looked like the hands of a clock, and the robe automatically equipped itself on him. Cyclo felt like it was a perfect fit the moment he wore it. The old man explained that the pattern showed the wearer's natural magical energy and asked if Cyclo liked it. Cyclo smiled and said he loved it, thanking the old man. The old man smiled back. The clerk also suggested some extra items. Cyclo bought a belt, gloves, and boots. With that, Cyclo was ready to move forward. The next day, in a big mansion, a man said sorry for making his guests wait. He said his name was Demos Northfolia, and with him was his son, Cruz Northfolia. Cruz nervously said hello. Cyclo also introduced himself, but he was more focused on Cruz, who was staring at him with curious eyes. Deimos explained that his son really wanted to meet Cyclo because he looked up to adventurers. Cyclo noticed that Deimos had called Cruz his son, and when he looked again, Cruz was dressed up like a noble's daughter, which surprised him. Deimos sat down and said there were 3 things he wanted to talk about. Cyclo already had an idea of what was coming. Before they started, Cyclo made it clear that he wasn't going to act overly polite just because Deimos was a noble. He said he came as an equal to talk, not to bow down. Guan felt a little embarrassed by Cyclo's bold attitude. Cyclo reminded them that it was Deimos who needed something from him, so the one who should be respectful was Deimos, not him. Guan sighed. Cruz looked at Cyclo with wide eyes, thinking he was cool. Deimos smiled a little and said he didn't plan to act all high and mighty in front of someone as strong as an SSS-ranked adventurer. Cyclo told Guan that Deimos seemed like a reasonable man after all. Then Deimos got to the main point. He wanted to buy information about the deep hole and was ready to pay at least 100 platinum coins. Cyclo was surprised. Deimos asked if that amount was enough, and Cyclo said it was fair. Cyclo told Deimos everything he saw and went through inside the deep hole. Deimos thanked him because the information was already more than enough. Still, he couldn't believe that the place Cyclo fell into was only the middle layers, not even the deepest part. Cyclo reminded him about the payment. Deimos told him not to worry and moved on to the next topic. Deimos said he didn't believe Cyclo was a criminal. Cyclo was surprised and asked if that meant he was wrongly accused. Deimos said yes. He had checked the trial records and found them full of problems. To him, calling an SSS-ranked adventurer a criminal based on those records didn't make sense. He wanted to say more, but since it was getting late, he invited Cyclo to stay for dinner. He also said his son would be glad. Cyclo tried to say no, but then saw Cruz looking sad, so he agreed, and Cruz looked happier. As the food was being served, Deimos continued talking. He said he didn't know what the capital had decided, but in his land, where they had their own rules, Cyclo was free. He told Cyclo he could accept requests like normal. Cyclo stayed quiet for a moment, then called Deimos a weirdo. Deimos said he heard that often. When all the food was ready, Cruz said he wanted Cyclo to try all of Northfolia's special dishes. Cyclo thanked him. He couldn't even remember the last time he had a real meal. His body didn't feel hungry anymore because it had been fixed at a certain time. He didn't need food, but he still ate some. To his surprise, he felt something warm and familiar. He kept eating the soup and bread. It had been a long time since he had eaten real food, and it tasted so good that he started crying. Deimos and Cruz just smiled and asked if he wanted more. Cyclo wiped his tears and asked if he could. For now, he felt he could trust these people, at least a little. After the meal, Deimos went ahead with his final request, something only an SSS-ranked adventurer like Cyclo could do. He wanted Cyclo to explore the deep hole. Cyclo agreed right away, knowing that it would help him grow stronger too. It was like solving 2 problems at once. Deimos was happy to hear that, but his real goal was to completely conquer the deep hole. Fully conquering a dungeon meant beating the guardian that protected the deepest floor and shutting down the dungeon's power. When a dungeon was conquered, the traps disappeared, the number of monsters dropped, and the whole dungeon slowly stopped working. Cyclo asked if that was really okay. After all, Northfolia had become rich and strong because of the dungeon. Deimos admitted that was true. The land's success had grown with the dungeon, but the disasters that hit the land also came from the deep hole. Cyclo remembered how monsters once poured out from the dungeon in an event called a stampede. He also pointed out that Northfolia had to rely on the dungeon's resources just to fight off those threats. If fully conquering the dungeon could lower the danger, then Deimos would be thankful for his help. Cyclo imagined a monster from the middle floors destroying the whole city alone. He remembered the kind people he had met in Northfolia. That helped him decide. He agreed to take on the 3rd request and asked what the reward would be. Deimos calmly told him to name his price. Cyclo asked if he really meant it. Deimos promised to give any reward Cyclo wanted, as long as it was something he could provide. That made the mission clear. They had to conquer the deep hole to protect the people from future monster attacks. Cyclo smiled for a moment and said that Deimos was not like other nobles. Deimos was glad to hear that, but he also told Cyclo there was one more thing he needed to complete the conquest: a party. Cyclo suddenly felt angry. He didn't understand why he needed others when he could handle the dungeon alone. Then memories of Maria and Alice came back to him. He told Deimos that he was done trusting people who might betray him. Deimos had expected that answer, so he recommended a place where Cyclo might meet people he could trust. Cyclo went to a place that didn't look like what a nobleman would have suggested. He expected it to be fancy, but it wasn't. Deimos had suggested buying slaves who were controlled by subjugation magic. That way, they would be at least a little more trustworthy. Cyclo thought that made sense. Not long after, a slave trader greeted Cyclo with a smile. He asked what kind of slaves Cyclo wanted. Cyclo explained that he needed slaves for dungeon exploring, and they had to be bound by subjugation magic. The shop was located just behind the Adventurers Guild, so there was a cycle happening. Some slaves became adventurers, and some adventurers ended up as slaves. Cyclo couldn't help but think the guildmaster must be unusual for letting this happen. The slave trader soon brought out a group of strong-looking male slaves and even a dog. They were former B and C ranked adventurers. One bald man joked that he was just babysitting someone in a dungeon and called it an easy job. Cyclo saw that this man was the strongest of the group, but he seemed full of pride and arrogance. Their skills were about the same as Cyclo's, so he asked to see another group of slaves. After a while, Cyclo realized the ex-adventurers weren't useful. None of them could handle the deeper parts of the deep hole. The slave trader began to worry that none of the slaves were good enough for Cyclo. That's when Cyclo decided to change what he was looking for. He no longer wanted strength. He wanted someone who was obedient and easy to work with. The trader then explained that, aside from adventurers, there were 3 kinds of slaves that worked well with subjugation magic: criminal slaves, pleasure slaves, and status slaves. Cyclo became interested in the last one. The trader explained that status slaves were people who were either born into that role or forced into it by law. The slaves in this group had been demoted because of their job skills. Cyclo was surprised to hear that and asked the trader to bring one out. The trader asked if he was sure, and Cyclo, getting annoyed, told him to do it already. The trader came back and said he didn't usually do this, but he could show one of their slaves. He covered his nose as a dirty girl walked in with chains around her wrists. Cyclo's eyes opened wide when he saw her. She looked familiar. The trader said her job skill was heretic. When Cyclo looked at her face closely, he realized she was the same girl he saw before at the garbage dump. He used his skill to analyze her again and found out she had been living in the trash ever since. Cyclo got angry and asked why she was being treated like this. The trader simply said it was because of the law. He explained that the Church of Skill Selection had ruled that anyone with a skill that went against their faith should not be treated like a human. Cyclo was furious. He remembered how he also suffered after getting the clock user skill. He used to think no one had it worse than him, but now he couldn't believe he had felt sorry for himself. At least he still had the freedom to live like a normal person. Cyclo began to question everything: the country, the religion, and even the God who allowed this system to exist. He thought it was wrong that people were judged only by their job skills. The trader assumed the girl wasn't good enough for Cyclo, but Cyclo surprised him by saying he wanted to buy her. The trader looked shocked and confused. Cyclo told him to go ahead with the sale. After the trader left, Cyclo got down on one knee in front of the girl and smiled. He asked her name. The girl's eyes lit up and she said her name was Mist Carmine. Cyclo moved his hand and Mist flinched and shut her eyes. He said Mist was a nice name and told her his own name. When he gently tapped her head, he saw that she was shaking. He realized she was scared, which made sense after all she had been through. He wanted her to know she was safe now. Cyclo promised he would never hurt her and gave her a hug. Mist looked confused, unsure of how to react. Cyclo then made a vow. He said he would protect her from now on, and if anyone tried to hurt her, he would stop them. He promised, and this time he meant it. Mist slowly stopped shaking. She felt calmer and thanked him. Soon the slave trader came back with the subjugation contract. He told Cyclo to pour his mana into the magic circle to finish it. Cyclo calmly did so, but his power was so strong that it surprised the trader. A glowing mark then appeared on Mist's neck. The trader explained that it was proof of the contract. To give Mist commands, Cyclo only had to use mana and speak. The trader also said that the mark could cause pain if strong mana was used, even from far away. Cyclo said he didn't think he would ever need that, but he would remember it. Once the contract was complete, Cyclo asked Mist to come with him. Mist said his hand would get dirty if he kept holding her arm. Cyclo told her not to worry because from now on, they were going to be companions. In a flashback, Mist had decided to work hard again by helping a priest. She cleaned the windows of the church. The old priest was worried she might be cold, but Mist told him she was fine and asked if there was anything else she could do. The priest told her to go home because it was already late. He said that someone as good as her would surely be watched over by God, and would one day receive a special skill. Mist went home with those words in her heart. When she got home, her mother scolded her for being late and for going out without permission. She told Mist to clean the house while she was gone. She complained that children were just a burden. That night, Mist only had leftover scraps for dinner. Still, she thought it was okay. She believed that if she kept being good, she would be rewarded someday. But during her coming-of-age ceremony, Mist received a heretic skill. Everyone around her was shocked. Mist asked the priest what her skill meant, but the kind man who once cared for her no longer wanted her near. The people were terrified that someone with a cursed skill had appeared. Mist was stunned. She believed she had behaved better than anyone else and had worked so hard. Yet in the end, not even God helped her. She looked toward her mother, who stood among the crowd, but all she got was a cold and angry stare. At that moment, Mist began to believe she had always been a bad person, someone who should never have been born. She started to apologize for being alive. She was soon sold to a slave trader and made to live among trash. She kept saying sorry for being born. One day, the slave trader told her that someone was interested in a heretic like her. Mist opened her eyes slowly and saw someone she had spoken to before. She didn't understand why he came for her. When he reached out his hand, she thought he would hit her, but instead he gave her the warmest pat she had ever felt. He told her not to be afraid because he wouldn't hurt her. But Mist believed he was wrong. She still thought she was a bad person. That belief started to break when the man, Cyclo, gently promised to protect her. He said he would never let anyone harm her because of her skill. He asked her to be brave. Mist reached out and held his hand. For the first time, she felt something change inside. No one had ever stood by her. Not her mother, not the people in her town, not even God. Cyclo was the first person to say he would be on her side. From that moment on, Mist chose to move forward for her master's sake. He gave her the strength to fight against the fate she had already accepted. She cried and silently thanked Cyclo. The two traveled by carriage to an unknown place. Mist eventually fell asleep and Cyclo gently woke her up. She said sorry for dozing off, but he told her it was okay. She asked where they were, and he said they had just arrived at the estate of the Lord of Northfolia. She was surprised, and he explained that they needed the Lord's help for a few things. When they reached the front door, Cruz happily greeted Cyclo. He asked about the girl, and Cyclo said Mist was part of his team. He added that he came to ask for a favor. Cyclo still saw Cruz as someone cheerful like a friendly dog, while Mist thought Cruz looked like a princess. Cruz said it was no problem and even offered to get some clothes ready for Mist. She was confused about where they were going, but they ended up in a bath area. Cruz told them to take their time and relax. Mist was surprised. Cyclo asked if she wanted to bathe together and offered to wash her back. Mist became embarrassed. Cyclo laughed a little and said she still seemed like a child. He guessed she was very tired and might not be safe alone in a big bath. Mist stayed quiet for a moment, then asked how old he thought she was. Cyclo guessed she was around 10 and asked why. Mist told him she was actually 17. Cyclo was shocked and said sorry, but Mist told him it was fine. They both stayed quiet for a while. Cyclo apologized again for the age mistake, but he explained he still thought it would be dangerous for her to be alone. He promised he had no bad thoughts and wouldn't do anything wrong. While they bathed, Mist thought her master was a strange person. She saw that he was trying hard not to make her uncomfortable, but he still cared about her safety. She told him it would have been easier if he just gave her an order. Cyclo understood what she meant, but he didn't want to use commands for something like that. He wanted her to be as free as possible. Mist started crying again. When Cyclo asked why, she said it was nothing. She just felt happy that her master could be so kind. Cyclo blushed when he saw her smile and felt a little flustered. Afterwards, Cyclo drank some tea while he waited for Mist. When Mist arrived, she was wearing a dress. Cyclo said it looked good on her and she thanked him. She shared that the people in the mansion dressed her using Cruz's old clothes and even fixed her hair. She felt it was more than she deserved. Cyclo only smiled. He then wanted to talk about her health. Mist didn't know what he meant. Cyclo searched his clock storage and found something. Mist guessed it was part of her master's skill. Cyclo brought out some energy cubes and explained that they were made from his life energy. He asked her to eat them. Mist was confused and asked if he was serious. He said they were special and told her to trust him. Mist was unsure because they didn't look like food and her eyes were starting to tear up from worry. Cyclo asked her to believe in him. Because he was her master, Mist didn't hesitate and put one in her mouth. She was surprised that it tasted sweet and made her feel lighter. Then her body started to shine and she said she felt warm. Cyclo hugged her and told her it meant her body was healing quickly. Mist's weak and thin body began to change. It was as if time sped up for her. Her body, which looked like that of a 10-year-old, now looked like that of a 17-year-old. Cyclo was shocked by how much she changed. He helped her to a mirror. When Mist saw herself, she was surprised. Cyclo reminded her how powerful the cubes were. Mist agreed and said they were amazing. She also thought Cyclo was amazing, like a god. He said that was too much. But to Mist, it wasn't. Her life had changed in just one day, and her heart was full of happiness. After that, Cyclo went straight to the main reason he brought Mist. He told her he needed someone to go with him while exploring dungeons as an adventurer. Because of that, he gave her just one order. Mist clenched her fist, wondering what it could be. At the same time, Cyclo thought about the women who didn't believe in him before. His only order was for Mist to believe in him, no matter what. Mist was surprised and asked if that was really all. Cyclo said he didn't need anything else. She then sat in front of him with her back turned and showed her crest. She guessed that Cyclo had been through something difficult too, but believed he could relax now. Cyclo placed the order on her and said sorry. Mist said it was okay and held his hand. She said that even without the slave command, she promised to keep believing in him. Cyclo stayed quiet for a moment, then thanked her. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, a woman wearing a hood walked to the front desk and asked if anything interesting had happened while they were away. Other adventurers nearby talked about how she was part of an all S-ranked team. The receptionist then told her about a skilled adventurer who had just returned from the unexplored parts of the deep hole. The woman was surprised, then smiled. She asked to hear more about the story. Soon after, Cyclo told Mist it was time to try using her skill, so they went outside together. Mist looked worried and asked if it would be safe. She said her skill was called Heretic, and if it turned out to be dangerous, it might hurt Cyclo or the people in the mansion. Cyclo called her kind and told her it would be okay. He promised to handle whatever happened. His words helped Mist feel calmer, and she said she was ready. Cyclo said he would send some mana into her and told her to try and feel the change. That was how she could learn to sense mana. Mist said she would do her best. When he started, she made a small sound. Cyclo asked if she was okay. Mist said she was just a little surprised. He focused again. Normally, people learned to sense mana when they got their job skill. Cyclo wondered if no one had taught Mist this before. Mist then asked if something was wrong. Cyclo asked how it was going, and Mist said she was starting to get it. He praised her for learning quickly. Mist looked shy and said she felt embarrassed, but didn't mind when he patted her head. Cyclo thought she looked cute. He told her the next step was to move the mana around inside her body. He explained that there were places where mana flowed and that her skill would be found in one of those spots. Some people believed it was connected to the soul. He thought this part was hard for most people, but he was willing to wait. To his surprise, Mist said she had found it. She said it was inside her, but it felt like it was also nowhere. It was a strange feeling. Cyclo told her that was the right spot and told her to send mana into it. Mist followed his instructions and activated her Heretic skill. It was a skill that people usually feared. A huge magic circle appeared above them. Cyclo realized it was a holy magic healing spell that covered a large area. He recognized it as Holy Heal. Excited, he hugged Mist and said she was amazing. Mist shouted in surprise, saying her skill was like that of a saint. Cyclo said it was rare to even use holy magic at all. Most people started with simple, single-target healing spells. He repeated how incredible her skill was and hugged her again. Mist said he was squeezing her too tightly. Cyclo apologized and said he would be more careful. Mist activated her second skill. A large barrier formed around them. Cyclo looked closely and realized it was barrier magic, a type of defensive shield. He was shocked she could already use intermediate-level magic. He then explained that Mist's abilities were split between light magic and holy magic. Both were known for offense and support. Mist was surprised that Cyclo knew so much about her skills. Cyclo stayed quiet for a moment, then shared that he once had a fiancé with a holy-type job skill. Mist noticed his expression was the same as when he told her to trust him no matter what. She realized it was something she shouldn't ask about again. She said nothing more and instead activated her third skill. Cyclo grew excited, expecting something powerful. Mist focused and explained that she could fix different things with this skill. Cyclo asked what she meant. She gave examples like making a nearby flower healthy again or removing a curse from her master's hair. Cyclo paused, then shared his concern that her third skill might be restoration magic, a legendary spell said to restore anything. Mist was shocked and asked if she really had such power. Cyclo said he had only heard of it before. He wondered if those were her only skills, but Mist said she had 2 more. Cyclo thought for a moment. Even saints were only known to have 4 skills. Mist had 5, and each one was as strong as or even stronger than a saint's. Holy magic users were rare and respected by the church, so he didn't understand why Mist was rejected by them. He began to question if the skill selection ritual was truly accurate, but in the end he no longer cared. What mattered now was Mist's power. He asked her to activate her 4th skill. When she did, a pair of transparent wings appeared on Cyclo's back. Mist apologized for the sudden effect, but Cyclo told her not to worry. He felt stronger, and Mist said the skill also weakened enemies around them. Cyclo realized it was a power that both helped allies and weakened opponents. When he asked how much mana it used, Mist said it was more than the previous 3 skills. Knowing that, Cyclo suggested saving it for special situations. He decided to call it Sanctuary. Mist seemed confused at first, but Cyclo explained that naming a skill could make it stronger. It helped the caster picture the effect clearly. He said the name meant something like a sacred domain. Mist liked the name and thanked him. Cyclo smiled and told her she could name it herself, but Mist said she already liked the one he gave. Soon, the boost effect wore off. Cyclo explained that some skills had lingering effects while others didn't. He told her there were 2 kinds of skills, active and passive. Active skills needed mana to activate. Passive skills were always working in the background. Mist understood that her magic worked because she had passive skills in holy and light magic. Cyclo praised her for learning quickly. Mist then chose to show her final skill. As soon as she activated it, she felt lighter on her feet. Cyclo asked her to try jumping. With very little effort, Mist jumped much higher than expected. Cyclo caught her and guessed the final skill might be related to physical strength or weapon handling. He suggested they visit the town later to look for weapons and armor. Mist asked if her skills would be useful to him. Cyclo said her talent was even greater than a saint's. Mist was happy to hear that and asked him to put her down. Cyclo apologized. After that, the two went back to eat lunch. Still, hearing the word saint brought back memories for Cyclo, but he reminded himself not to think about the past anymore. They had already chosen to walk different paths from that day on. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 11. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.